Hey, welcome to Store Brand Comics. I'm Tio, and I talk about comic books. And today we are continuing our series on My Hero Academia, a series that I'm actually talking about 3 volumes at a time instead of 1, because the chapters are a little shorter than your average American comic book, because it is Japanese, so it reads right to left instead of the other way around. But yeah, I'm talking about it. Volumes 4, 5, and 6. That's horrifying. One thing I've always thought is that the writer-artist behind this series would be probably super good at a horror manga if he ever chose to do so, because some of the stuff he draws is just creepy. But yeah, My Hero Academia is it was created by Kohei Horikoshi and is published in the Shonen Jump magazine in Japan. But in America, we just get the collected volumes of it instead of having to read the weekly magazine. But yeah, so volumes 4, 5, and 6. Volume 3 left off partway into a sports festival that the school depicted in these books was doing, where the main character, Deku, had managed to win a race full of other superpowered students just by sheer ingenuity. Like, he didn't use his own powers at all, because at this point in the series, he still can't use his own super strength without breaking his bones. So, pretty intense stuff there. But yeah, this one depicts the next event, which was like a cavalry event where 2 or 3 students would lift another student up and like basically carry them around and act as that student's horse, and they would all like wear headbands with different point values on them, and the point of the game is to snatch each other's headbands, and whoever has the highest score based on the headbands they snatched by the time the timer runs out, then they win. And you throw all of their crazy superpowers into the mix, and you've got an interesting little sporting event. I honestly don't remember who exactly wins that one. It's not super important. The top scorers of that event are like all put into this big tournament, and obviously Deku, the main character, is one of those top scorers who is put in the tournament, as is his rival Bakugo, who, if you watch the previous video, likes to beat on Deku. And also, another important addition to this tournament roster is this guy on the cover of Volume 5. His name is Shoto. Last name Todoroki. You're going to hear me call him Todoroki more often because that's just how I refer to him. But yeah, as you can see, he's got like half red hair, half white hair. That's because his parents, his father has fire-based superpowers and his mother had ice-based superpowers. So he's kind of like a half and half baby. He's got an even mix of both. But he doesn't want to use his father's fire powers because he resents his father for various reasons that come from his upbringing. So a huge point of conflict in this particular volume during the tournament, because the bulk of this volume is the tournament that takes place. But yeah, huge conflict for that is Deku trying to convince him, like, your fire powers don't belong to your dad, they belong to you, so you should use them like they're yours, sort of thing. So it's an interesting conflict to have in a superhero story, cutting yourself off from half of your power simply because of who you inherited it from is an interesting personal struggle and conflict. Another interesting thing about this volume is one of Deku's female classmates, Ochako, whose whole thing, her power is that she can basically erase something's weight, including herself, so she can make something weightless, and then when she presses her hands together and says release, it gets its weight back. So she actually, during the tournament, gets a fight with Bakugo of all people, and that's a super fun fight to read because of how his explosions interact with the battlefield they're on, and how she, uses her gravity powers to manipulate the rubble and all that. It's a fun fight. That's definitely one that I don't want to spoil too much and let you read. I want to let you read for yourself. I'm kind of glossing over the plot in this one a little bit more because I don't want to spoil too much. I talked about the plot a lot in the first video because those first 3 volumes you really kind of gotta get people like into some of the ideas of the story to encourage them to read it for certain things. So that's the way I look at it. Is early on I tell people things about the plot, the early plot, to get them, like, to encourage them to kind of just experience those things for themselves. And the further along it gets, the more tight-lipped I am about details. So that leads us to volume 6, where this creepy guy right here on the cover, he is a villain named Stain. And the premise for this volume is the students from the Hero Academy are going on hero internships and basically learning how their powers can be applied in a professional heroic sense. But this Stain guy is going around specifically targeting and killing superheroes. And one of the heroes he targeted is the older brother of one of Deku's classmates. This guy with his back turned here, in the white armor. I don't know how well you can see him. Him right here. His name is Ida. He's the super speed guy that I talked about, the one with the mufflers in his legs. His older brother, who I assume has a similar power, was one of Stain's targets. And while he survived his attack from Stain, there's a plane going over the house. Ida's brother survived his attack from Stain, but Ida still kind of wants revenge. So that's an interesting story. But the thing is, none of the students are allowed to fight supervillains because none of them are licensed superheroes, which is definitely not something that you see in your typical American superhero comic. So that's a fun little constraint and potential consequence for just going off on your own and being just a loose cannon superhero. This series is very different from how I would say your average like American superhero series is, in regards to the fact that, like, when an American superhero in an American comic book just goes superheroing and kind of does whatever they want, there are very few consequences to that sort of thing. But My Hero Academia's superhero world has a very rigid structure with rules that must be followed. So it's definitely an interesting world where, yeah, you've got all these superpowered kids who are training to be superheroes, but ultimately, until they're adults, they are still just as powerless as kids are in the real world. So yeah, that's a pretty interesting little sticking point. One thing I wanted to talk about in this video concerning this series that I didn't get the chance to talk about in the first video, even though I wanted to, was the names for some of these superheroes and the costumes for the superheroes, which, considering the fact that these 3 volumes feature a pretty significant expansion of My Hero's world, it feels like this is the right time to kind of talk about those things, I guess. Something I want to say about the costume design is, for most of the characters, I love it. Some of the characters are a little weird, like Todoroki, the white and red guy. His official, like, costume that, like, he designed for himself is a little weird looking, which is probably why he's actually usually drawn in like a school uniform of some kind instead. of his actual costume, because I think that the creator and artist realized that the costume he designed for Todoroki to be a superhero in doesn't look as good as anything else he's dressed in. So he's usually wearing like some sort of sport uniform instead of his actual costume. But Deku's costume is just kind of like this, usual green jumpsuit sort of thing. It looks like a superhero costume. And it started off with like this cowl that came over his head with these two like bunny ears coming off the top to emulate All Might's, hair antennae that he has. As well as like this big old like grill sort of face mask that is meant to emulate All Might's smile. But then as the series has gone on, Deku is drawn with his cowl down like a hood, instead of, up over him, and with the face mask kind of hanging down around his neck instead of actually on his face, which has sort of become just the standard design for him. Which I think actually kind of looks better than the bunny ear outfit, because his naked face with the superhero costume, design-wise, just kind of feels better than him wearing like an actual cowl and face mask. Bakugo has, I think, my favorite costume out of all the students, because true to his explosive nature as well as his explosive powers, he's got these giant gauntlets shaped like grenades on both arms with these big old pins at the top, and it stores his sweat, so the more he moves and acts, the more sweat he has stored inside these grenade gauntlets, so that there's this pin that he can pull so that he can actually shoot an explosive wave of his own sweat like a projectile. And it is crazy cool, and I love it. He's got the best costume. Plus he's got this like black mask that, comes over his eyes and like reaches up into his hairline, so it looks like his hair, which is just a big blonde explosion of hair, it looks like, it's extending downwards like a shadow over his eyes, and then it ties off in the back in this big black and orange explosion of cloth behind his head. I just love Bakugo's costume. It's one of my favorite costumes in the entire series, other than probably All Might's costume. I like All Might's costume because it's just a very classic, like, sort of Superman style outfit. But yeah, I guess now's a good time also to kind of start talking about names too. One thing that I love about this series is the fact that just based on the superhero names, you can very much tell that this is the product of a Japanese writer who loves American comic books, trying to come up with American-style superheroes and give them American-style names. And it works a lot of the time. All Might is, I think, one of the most interesting and kind of cool superhero names I've heard, especially for a Superman-type character. Then there are just other character names in general, like Power Loader is kind of a generic sounding superhero name, but it still sounds like a superhero name. Sounds cool. Midnight is a fun superhero name. There's a size-changing superhero named Mount Lady, which is one of the most, like, I guess, creative size change based names for a superhero. I really like that. But yeah, like these heroes have just some of the coolest names, and then you get names like Best Genist, and his whole thing is, I believe he manipulates fiber, and he's dressed entirely in denim, even like to the extent that it's up past his nose. All you can see is his eyes and the top of his head with like this blonde sort of swoosh hair over his forehead. And he's called Best Genist. Like, I don't know what to say to that. One of the coolest, I guess, superhero names for these characters is it goes to one of the old man mentor sort of characters. Is Gran Torino, and his power is that he, I guess, can kind of shoot air out of the bottom of his feet, so he can bounce around and ricochet off of the walls and just objects in general. And he's a short little old man, kind of Yoda-ish in appearance. He's got this big old yellow cape that trails behind him as he flies through the air. He's a very fun old man mentor character. He helps Deku kind of learn more about his powers and expand his moveset in interesting ways. Don't want to spoil too much. The further into this series I get, the more I'm going to have to spoil things to talk about them, but I don't want to spoil too much for this one. But I will say Gran Torino teaches Deku how to make his powers combat applicable without mutilating himself every time he needs them. So that's definitely important if you want to be a superhero. It's, learn how not to shatter your own skeleton. There's also a chapter in this book where the students are kind of encouraged to come up with their own superhero names, and a few of them come up with some really fun ones. Like there is, okay, hang on, this girl, the pink girl right here, she's one of my favorite like supporting characters from the series. I can't really say she's one of my favorite characters from the series because she hasn't really had the opportunity to do a whole lot, but as like a background supporting character, I like her a lot. Her name is Mina, and her whole thing is that, similar to Bakugo, her powers are also sweat-based, but her sweat is corrosive and acidic rather than explosive, so she can melt things with her sweat. Though she seems to be able to control how corrosive her sweat is, so she's also been able to use it to just kind of like slide and move quickly. Like she had her costume designed specifically so that her sweat can be filtered down through the bottom of her shoes, so she can just kind of skate on solid ground. It sounds really gross, but it's super cool. And the superhero name she came up with for herself was Alien Queen, but then one of the teachers was like, that's okay, but let's stick to something that kind of applies to you more now. So I think what was suggested for her was Pinky. That's how she responds to it in the anime. She's like, Pinky! Which I just think is really funny because she just screams it at the rest of the class, like, Pinky! Like, she's almost like, seriously? But yeah. And then Bakugo comes up with the end-all, be-all, best superhero name ever in existence for all eternity, King Explosion Murder. And then when he's told that name's not really appropriate, he somehow one-ups himself and comes up with the even better sounding, never to be topped, this will go down in history as the single greatest superhero name ever conceived, Lord Explosion Murder. I love it because it's so, I mean, it's supposed to be stupid because he's a stupid teenage boy, like wannabe edgelord type of guy. But it's just so fun, and I love it. I love the fact that this entire series just like, when it's just kind of being fun, it's just unfiltered fun. And things like Lord Explosion Murder come out of it. I still call Bakugo Lord Explosion Murder sometimes because it's fun, and that's the superhero name he made for himself. It's like, who am I to disagree with that, you know? But legit now, like for real, I think my favorite superhero name that any of these characters came up with was Red Riot. Which, this guy right here, he is the one who came up with Red Riot for his superhero name. His real name is Kirishima, and I love him as more than just a supporting character. He's gotten to do more, especially recently in the manga. That like he got his moment to shine. And I have always just kind of liked him. I like his power set. His power set is that he hardens, like his body, like he stiffens, and you can see like his body get jagged. Like you can tell that he's supposed to be kind of rock-like, but it doesn't look like he's made of rock. He just gets jagged, and like he can like get his fingers to like tip out in like hard tips, so he can use them to like slash things, kind of like claws. But yeah, he's super cool, and Red Riot is that is a cool superhero name. So yeah, like there are some superhero names that come out of this series. It's like there are some American comic book characters that could, or writers, I should say, that could take notes from this with their superhero names. And then there are others where it's just like you get best genist out of it. I try not to criticize the teenage characters for the names they come up with, because a lot of those names, according to the fiction of the story and the fact that they're in high school and still kind of learning who they are as heroes, a lot of those names are supposed to be temporary. Though I'm pretty sure Deku's hero name is going to be permanent. But yeah, a lot of their superhero names are meant to be temporary. But so I try not to criticize those ones too much. So until some of these characters get more temporary names, I'm going to hold off on making fun or criticizing them too much. Because there's some where it's like, there's a frog girl in this class who, she gives herself the name Froppy. It's like, that sounds like a Pokemon. And actually, it legit sounds like a Pokemon. There is a frog Pokemon called Froakie. So yeah, like Froppy, it sounds like a Pokemon. And then you get Ochako, the Gravity Girl, who I can never remember if it's her first name or her last name. I think it's her last name. Yeah, it's her last name. Is Uraraka. Try saying that 5 times fast. And so she mixes that with the word gravity and settles on the superhero name Uravity. But yeah, that's a little. Then again, this isn't, like I said, this is a Japanese series, and I don't know that like concise, like individualized superhero names are a huge thing over there. It's kind of a new thing that was brought over to them probably by American superheroes. So you know, I try not to judge it too harshly based on that. So this bit's going to be a little bit shorter, the art bit, because as I said in the previous video, it's the same main artist doing it all, Kohei Horikoshi, the writer and creator of the series. But I just want to like praise some of the like character designs. I know I just talked about costume designs in the previous bit, but like actual character designs, one in particular, Stain, and I'm not talking about this bit on the cover. This is a special horror movie poster of a cover. But like Stain's actual design in the book, like the way his scarf flows behind him and it's all ragged and torn and frayed, and his shaggy hair, how it like just kind of rests on top of his head. He's got this abnormally shaped head where it kind of comes almost in like a crescent moon shape, with his chin, his jaw like resting kind of down here, like kind of the way my beard makes my head look like it's shaped but somewhat thinner. The way like his mask wraps like kind of loosely around his head, but it's like it's a rag, and it, you know, comes off the back of his head and kind of extends outward and meets his scarf and mingles with it. Like the way his tongue comes out of his mouth, because his superpower is tongue based. Um, but like the way it comes out of his mouth for him to use his power, is just like he could give Venom a run for his money for creepy tongues. Um, the fact that he doesn't have a nose, like a visible nose, is unsettling in a Voldemort sort of way. So yeah, I love Stain's design and the knives he has strapped all over his body. The big old, like, dulled edge, sort of jagged, not serrated, but jagged sword blade that he has, that you can tell is jagged and dull like that from, the number of times he's used it. So like, yeah, Stain is, I love his design. He is everything visually that you want in a creepy street level villain, whose whole thing is that he's a serial killer who specifically targets superheroes. I guess I do kind of want to dive a little bit into Stain's philosophy, just to kind of express why I find him interesting as a villain. And if you search My Hero Academia, you'll find a billion anime YouTube channels analyzing Stain as a character to death. This is a topic that has been done to death, and it was done to death like 2 years ago, when the episodes based on these chapters first aired, because these 3 books that I'm talking about right here were all adapted as a part of the show's 2nd season. So all the anime YouTubers have already gotten to this already. I'm just talking about this now because I'm talking to a comic book reading crowd, and I don't know how many of you have watched anime or are interested in anime. Stain as a character, his whole philosophy is that the current superhero culture has kind of gone a little rotten, because with the advent of the professional hero, it's no longer about heroism for its own sake. Now it's all showboating, popularity, brand deals, make as much money as you can, and it doesn't matter who you step on your way up. Basically, your typical celebrity culture sort of thing, or just general like corporate business culture too, I guess. But yeah, like Todoroki's dad, this guy's dad, the one with the fire powers. There goes another plane. Todoroki's dad, he's the number 2 superhero behind All Might, and he wants to be number 1. And I guess one of the reasons he even bothered breeding his genes into his son, which is a messed up way of putting it, but that's really the way it's presented in the book, was essentially that he probably figured that he wasn't going to be number 1 as long as All Might was around, so he wanted to at least make sure that his son could be the number 1 hero, and like his legacy could be cemented, and he can basically point to his son and say, see, look what my genes made. And that's one of the reasons that Shoto doesn't want to use his fire powers, is he doesn't want people to see his father in him. But yeah, like, that's the sort of thing that happens because of heroes who aren't in it for just the sake of saving people. Heroes who are in it because they want fame and glory and money and power. All Might, the number 1 hero, is in it just for the sake of being a hero. He really is the Superman of his world. He does it because he's a beacon of hope, a legitimate beacon of hope in his world. Which is why he doesn't want people to know that he has a time limit on his powers, or even that he passed his powers on quite yet, because he wants people to still be able to hope because of him. He wants people to be able to look at him and know that they are protected, even if that's not entirely true anymore. So Stain's philosophy is that, like, All Might is the only true hero left in the world, so I'm going to go around killing all the pretenders. And he basically outright states, like, if a superhero is going to kill me, I want it to be All Might because he's the only real one. So yeah, that's like sort of the same admiration for All Might that Deku has, but twisted in a bit of a sick way. And the thing is, while Stain is overall wrong about superhero culture, because kids like Deku are still coming up, and Deku wants to be the number one hero because he wants to be the next beacon of hope. He wants people to look at him the way they look at All Might and think, I am safe because he is here. Deku is in it not for glory or fame, but because he is a true hero in the making. So just because people like that even still exist, Stain is just kind of proven wrong. But he still has a point because people like Endeavor exist. Endeavor being Todoroki's dad. The number 2 hero, the guy with fire powers. So yeah, it's a very... It's about as nuanced, I'd say, as shonen battle manga gets, because it's very on the nose, but it still kind of gives you the chance to figure a lot of this stuff out for yourself too as you read it, make you feel smart. So yeah, that's yeah. The thing is, the Stain arc, which happens concurrently with the whole internship thing, is really kind of a natural, like, not natural, but it flows directly from the sports festival arc, so it all kind of flows as like one long story. Now this one, volume 6, does end on a bit of a cliffhanger, so Stain isn't quite defeated by the end of this book, and I won't tell you whether or not he is defeated until next time. He could get away. He could die. The characters that you might think are gonna fight him might not even fight him. It might not even be characters. It might be one character. It might be half a character. It might be every character. You never know with this book. So yeah, that's volumes 4, 5, and 6 of My Hero Academia. Written and illustrated primarily by Kohei Horikoshi, and his team of assistants, and published in Shonen Jump magazine. And also just kind of published in these as well, obviously. So yeah, these ones don't carry the same color scheme as the previous ones. The previous 3 volumes all had Superman colors, the red, blue, and yellow. These ones are kind of, I guess, a reddish orange or an orangish red, just straight up white, and then like burgundy. I don't know if you can see very well, but yeah, My Hero Academia. If you're reading along with me, keep reading. It's good. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. If you haven't, that is in order. I have commanded it. So I was at a just as a little side end thing, I was at a My Hero Academia convention actually a couple months ago with a friend of mine, and this is what Endeavor, the fire guy, looks like. You see how he's got normal hair and then his beard and eyebrows are on fire. I don't typically cosplay, but I was thinking the next time I go to one of those conventions, I might go as Endeavor, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to dye my hair and spike it up, and then I'm just going to set my beard on fire